Hello everyone and welcome to another game of the 2019 Riga FIDE Grand Prix semifinals. It's Alexander Grischuk versus Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. So far Maxime was able to kick out every opponent in the classical time format. I don't think Maxime reached the rapids in any of the previous matchups. So let's see how he does against Alexander Grischuk. This is the second game of the classical time format, and the first game ended in a draw. So here Grischuk has the white pieces, and let's see what happened. Grischuk goes for d4 with knight to f6, c4, and the g6. And here, well, we have the King's Indian defense, but already an early h4 from Alexander Grischuk. We even have a nice photo of this moment. There you have it. Let me just open it up. Here it is. Sorry about that. Yep, here it is. Thought I'd prepared it, but I didn't. But never mind. There you have it. Nice and big. So as you can see, h4 is on the board. And Maxime was so confused with this early h4 move that he even took Sasha's bottle of water and claimed it as his own. As you can see, Maxime has 2 bottles of water now, but that's what kind of an effect an early h4 can have, in a serious chess game. So hope you enjoyed that. Now let's return to the game. Also, this is the same move Veselin Topalov used against Anish Giri in the 2016 candidates in Moscow. That game ended in a draw. But this game is a bit different. With c5 by Grischuk, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, the same way Giri tried to counter Topalov's early h4 in the candidates 2016. We have d5, and now basically what we have is a Benoni with an h4, which is not something you will see very often. Maxime continues in the spirit of the Benoni with b5, well, sort of a nice Benko type gambit. C captures on b5, and now a6, offering a second pawn, but with e3, and e3 is a new move here. Topalov captured on a6 against Giri in 2016 candidates. We have e3 now, and already on move 6 we have a completely new game, which is always very exciting. So Maxime continues bishop to g7 with knight to c3, and now we have castles. Both players still reluctant to waste the tempo capturing on the queen side. With knight to f3 by Grischuk, and now d6 with a4. Not a3, sorry about that, with a4 and bishop to g4 now, and rook to a3. A very nice rook lift, and now a captures on b5. With bishop captures on b5, developing the bishop also. That's a lot of activity for the light square bishop, and now knight to a6 with e4 by Grischuk, and now knight to b4. The knight is now occupying a very nice square, and here already you can see what's about to happen. This pawn is coming to c4 at some moment. This knight from here is going to control, well, the d3 square, and this knight here will join in the action depending on what white plays, but most likely with something like knight to d7 followed by knight to e5, and from there this knight can also join in on the d3 action. So bishop back to e2, and now comes knight to d7. This knight, as we already mentioned, either is coming to e5, or maybe if c4 is pushed, then maybe to c5, and from there to d3. With castles by Grischuk, and now queen to b6. The queen is now coming to b7, rook to e1, and now queen to b7. From the queen now from b7 lets the knight come over to the b6 square, and also if the center well is attacked, then there also the queen will be putting pressure on the e4 square. With bishop to g5 now, attacking the e7 pawn, and now bishop captures on f3. And here, although Grischuk can capture with the bishop, it's, I don't know, do you want to do this? Bishop captures, knight e5, attacks the bishop, bishop e2, and then c4, and we get this whole idea that we've already talked about. Both knights now control the d3 square. Also, the pawn really helps out, and once this knight comes here, it's basically a monster knight, and it's going to be very difficult for white to defend this. So Grischuk tries a different idea. G captures on f3, strengthening the center, but it doesn't really change black's plan. With knight to e5, now the queen also guards the e7 pawn, so you cannot capture here. And here we have rook to f1. you don't want this c4 and knight to d3 to come with an attack on the rook. So rook to f1, and the rook is on a much safer square there. So c4, Maxime continues in the same fashion that he planned, but here Grischuk says, I think your c4 was a bit premature. I'm just going to push b3 here, attack your pawn here, and what are you going to play now? So here you have to make a choice. Here Maxime played rook f to c8, but there was also a very interesting move. As you can see, the bishop is attacking the knight on c3. So is knight captures on f3 an option here? It is an option, but after bishop captures on f3 and bishop captures on c3, you can capture on c4, and white will say, I'm very happy with this. I have a very strong center. I have a passed a pawn that I'm ready to push, so I like my position. Maxime is not interested in this. He just plays rook f to c8. This rook is now ready to support either the pushing of this passed pawn, or if white captures here, then the knight can just recapture. With bishop back to d2 now, not allowing this tactic anymore, with bishop captures on c3, but now we have knight b to d3. And now, even if this knight doesn't really have any threats at the moment, it's still a monster knight, and well, you don't really have a good way of dealing with it. Even if you capture once, the knight will recapture, and now this knight is on a d3 light square. You don't really have a good way of getting rid of it. You'd have to waste 3 moves, something like knight e2 to c1 to captures, but you know, in those 3 moves, black will also get a say in this. So after knight b to d3 with f4, first Grischuk wants to get rid of this knight and only then capture on d3, so this knight will not be able to recapture here. But here Maxime says, nope, we're not gonna move the knight, queen to b4. And here is where the party's really getting started. Now the rook on a3 is under attack. If the knight moves anywhere now with check, then this knight also becomes under attack, as the queen is attacking it twice. If you capture here, then the rook also will be attacking the knight here. So there are a lot of tactics here, and Grischuk has to decide what to do here. He plays knight to b1. He defends the rook and also opens up an attack against the black queen here. So what does black play here? It's a very complicated position. So what would you play here? Really, just pause the video here and try to find a nice move with black, and that is what Maxime did in this position. While I give you a couple of seconds, for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations, you are an excellent pusher of passed pawns. Well, not yet is it a passed pawn, but it will be once you push it. So c3 here. Congratulations to everyone who found it. So what do you reply here? Do you capture? Do you capture with the knight? Do you capture with the bishop? Do you play something else? Do you maybe capture the knight on e5? Well, all of those are very interesting options. So let's just check a few of them. Bishop captures on c3. What happens here? Well, just rook captures on c3. And now after knight captures, now not capturing the rook here, but rather knight captures on f4. And now it's just a so superior position for black that white doesn't even have a move. Your rook is still under attack, so you should move it. Let's say rook a2. You don't want to put it on this diagonal here. But now queen captures on c3. And now what do you play here? You have to play something. Queen to h3 followed by queen to g2 will be deadly, so maybe f3, block the queen, but then queen to e3 check. Now what do you play here? King h1, knight to h5 now, going after the g3 square with check. Rook to g1, but now queen to f4, going for the capture here. And now after queen to e1, you get knight to d3, and here you just don't have any more good moves. If you capture, for example, bishop captures, you get queen captures on f3 with check, and after rook blocks, you get queen to h3 check. King to g1, now the bishop comes into the game, bishop d1, bishop d4 check, king f1, queen h1 check, king has to go to e2, now you grab a rook, king d1, now you grab the other rook, and white is just down too much material. On the other hand, after this c3 move, you don't have to capture with the bishop, you could also try to capture with the knight, but still, Maxime's idea here was not again capturing the rook, but knight to b2. First you get this knight out of the way with an attack on the queen, and once white replies, let's say knight b5, he opens up an attack against your queen. Queen captures on e4, and white doesn't really have all that much to do. The queen is under attack here. Once you move the queen, you get the knight back to d3, And now, again, it's just a very difficult position to play for white, and black will just be very happy here. It's much better than capturing, for example, with the bishop in that position, but still, bishop captures here is met with knight captures on f3 with check. Not something you want to do. And now the problem is you have to go under the mask of the queen. You can go to h2, so whatever you play, king g2, and this capture comes with check, so it just loses. Not you know, pleasant a position at all to be in. So Grischuk did the only thing he had left, f captures on e5, but now knight to b2, attacking the queen, queen to c2, and only now c captures on d2. We have queen captures on b2, and now queen captures on e4. There's no rush to recapture here. White is unable to capture due to the pin. So queen captures on d2, and now rook to c2. And here, even though black is down a piece, he will get his piece back. Now the bishop on e2 will fall. And there are a few ways you can give up this piece. You can play something like bishop to f3, just try and give it up there. Grischuk tried a different idea. Queen to d3. And now, of course, Maxime had to capture the bishop. We have rook captures, queen captures, rook captures, and e captures on d6. We have e captures on d6, and now knight to d2. Attacking the rook, rook captures on h4. There was no way to save the h4 pawn. And now not rook captures on h4 immediately, but first rook captures on g4, king to h1, and only now rook captures on h4 with check without wasting time. King g2, now comes rook to d4, attacking the knight, knight to f3, and now still not going after this capture and allowing white to start pushing his passed pawn, but first rook to g4 check. King to h3, and now rook back to b4. Here, Maxime is not interested in grabbing the d5 pawn and allowing white to create a pawn storm on the queen side, so he just blocks the passed pawns on the queen side. We have rook to b1, preparing to try and get this rook out of the game, or if this pawn is attacked another time, then the b3 pawn is nicely defended. So rook to c8, Maxime prepares to bring this rook into the game, king to g2, and now rook to c3. And now what do you play here? Here, knight to g1 was played by Grischuk, getting the knight out of the way, probably going for knight to e2 to kick away the rooks. But also a possibility here was, probably Grischuk was not interested in it, was rook to e1, just giving up the b3 pawn. And it's really an interesting idea to try and give away the pawn. But probably black would go for something like a rook to g4 check first, and only after king to f1, as now you lose the knight here, a knight is better than the pawn, so after king to f1 you would lose the knight, but now comes rook to e8 check, bishop blocks, and now you start pushing your passed pawn. And there's really no easy way to prevent the pawn from queening. You have to go for something like rook b4, and after a6, capture here. White really doesn't care. Pushes a7, and now you will have to give up your rook for the queen. Captures, and you get this position: rook and 2 pawns against the bishop and 4 pawns. A drawn endgame. So one of the options was actually rook to e1 here. But okay, Grischuk goes for rook, knight to g1 with rook to c2 now, preparing to bring the bishop into the game. Bishop to d4 will be an idea, attacking the f2 pawn. Knight back to f3, controlling the d4 square, but now rook back to g4 with check. King f1, and now rook to f4, attacking the knight. So what do you play here? King to g2, Grischuk repeats. We have rook to g4 check, king to f1, rook to f4, king to g2, but now not rook to g4 and claiming a draw by threefold, but rather g5, just asking what do you want to play. So here, Grischuk played rook to f1. He's not interested in waiting for g4, where he would have to move the knight and then he would lose the f2 pawn. But it also was possible. Here, if you try something like b4, you can actually allow g4. But now you get this very complicated line with king to g3, where you either move the rook and lose the g4 pawn, or you move the rook and then the knight can move. So here you would have to give up the exchange. Rook captures, now rook captures on f3, g captures, and now you start pushing the pawn. But after rook to b2, black is much better here. For example, rook captures, bishop captures, and you start pushing the pawn, but bishop d4 makes everything work. b7, you will prevent the pawn from queening, and the bishop will do a very nice job preventing both of the queenside pawns from queening. You just get your king into the game now, maybe grab the d5 pawn, start pushing your pawns, and win the game. It's a very easy game to win. B4 was one of the options here, although not really a working one. So rook to f1, Grischuk gets ready for g4, so he can move the knight. But now rook to g4, once again, king to h1, and now rook to c3, just attacking this knight here. So what do you do here? Here you could try a lot of things. Knight to h2 is a very interesting idea. For example, if knight to h2, then yes, you get rook to h3. And now the threat is rook to h4 and winning the knight. But here, white had a very interesting idea, b4. And now you give up your a3 rook for this rook. For example, rook captures, you get knight captures on g4. You lose your queenside pawns, but it's, you have to do something. Rook b1, you do save this one. But now bishop to c3 attacks the pawn, b5, and then you have to give up the knight if you don't want to lose the passed pawn, and so on and so on. But black would again be better here. So Grischuk tried rook to g1, but it still doesn't work. But that's up to you to find out. Feel free to pause the video here and try to find the winning move for Maxime Vachier-Lagrave in this position. I'll give you a couple of seconds. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations, you are an excellent endgame player with, a lot of rooks on the board. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, rook to f4 wins for black. So here, again, what do you play here? Knight to h2 was played. Although knight to g5 is also an interesting option, it leads to rook captures on f2, and now the threat is just kick the knight away and deliver mate here on h3. So you'd have to probably make some room, rook d1, but now rook to c2, and whatever you play, let's say knight e4, you're just gonna deliver check, king g1 and f5, and you win the knight. The knight has no squares. This is taken by the rook, this is taken by the pawn, sorry, this is taken by the pawn, these squares are taken by the rooks. You can't go to g3 or g5 because rook check just picks up the knight if you go there. This is covered by the bishop, and of course, lastly but not leastly, if you capture on d6, bishop to f8 just wins the game on the spot. You can't defend the knight. If you move the knight, you lose the rook, and so on. So, not possible. Grischuk tried knight to h2, but here Maxime played rook captures on f2, threatening rook to h3, and, well, just checkmating white here. We have rook captures on g5, but here Maxime just played rook c to c2, and it was in this position that Alexander Grischuk resigned the game, and, well, he did it for good reason, because whatever you play here, let's say you don't want to give up the knight, you can go knight g4, but then you get rook to c1, and it's checkmate, since you just blocked your rook. If you don't move it there, you could try something like rook to h5 to try and defend the knight, but still rook c1 check, you have to block, this is mate. And any other move, what can you play? Let's say you try something like knight to f3, try and give up piece. Okay, black will grab your piece, but you don't have any compensation. You can't start even pushing your pawns. You could start pushing a5, but doesn't really do that much. Black will have everything, in order. You'll play king f8, bishop d4, just block the pawns, and it's easily winning endgame for black. So of course Grischuk knows this, and after rook c to c2 he resigned the game, and this means that he was just knocked out of the FIDE Grand Prix semifinal by Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, who will meet, don't want to spoil anything for you if you're not interested, but he will meet Shahriar Mamedjarov, who has knocked out Wesley So out of the semifinal. We already saw the game that Shahriar Mamedjarov won. We said that Wesley has a chance to get back into the game with the white pieces, but Mamedjarov was able to hold Wesley to a draw, and then we will see tomorrow. I don't think there's a rest day tomorrow. We will see Shahriar Mamedjarov versus Maxime Vachier-Lagrave in the finals of the FIDE Grand Prix being held in Riga. So, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Scott Levick and Christopher Dick for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. Today's video came a little bit late, but my air conditioning is not working, and I really wasn't able to record before, as it was really just too hot in my apartment. So sorry about that. But yeah, like I said, I do hope you enjoyed it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing the Capablanca saga, checking up the finals of the FIDE Grand Prix, checking up on your suggestions, and so on and so on. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.